All right, so now that we have learned how to create a basic chat command, what we're going to do is we're going to create another command that is going to reach out to an external API on the internet and then pull back some information that we are then going to manipulate, and then we're going to spit it out in chat. And what we're going to do specifically, as you can see at the top of the screen, is we are going to create a command that defines a word. So essentially it just reaches out to a dictionary, grabs the definition of a word, and then gives that definition of the word to chat. So this has happened a number of times throughout my streaming career. I've been streaming for around 7 years. And throughout that time, there's been a number of times that we'll see a word, like say in an RPG, especially Final Fantasy 14 likes to do this, where we'll see a word and we're like, in the world is that? And one of us will need to look it up, or we have someone that is English second language in chat. They're moderately fluent in English, but they don't know specific words. So it would be nice and to be able to have a command in chat that you can just say exclamation point define and then the word, and it will reach out to an API and grab the definition and spit it out in chat. Makes life easy and interesting for everyone. And so what we're going to do is we're going to use a API that I found just called Free Dictionary API. It's that simple. And you can see the address for this API at the top of the screen. And I will also have this API link in the description of this video. So the way that it's going to work is we are going to use the bot to reach out to this address. And so we're going to exchange the pointy brackets and then word with the word that we are trying to define, just without the pointy brackets. So just like in this example right here. And so what this is going to do for you, just learning how to do this, is you're going to learn how to reach out to the internet in order to grab a source of information and then pull it in to your program and then be able to do something with it. So in this case, we are given a array as a return result, an array of JSON objects, which so if a word has multiple definitions, you'll get multiple JSON objects within that. So at least that's how it seems. So we'll pull in some data, look at the JSON, how it's parsed, just in case this information is not up to date. And then we will have the bot parse that information and then spit it out into chat in a clean way. So let's get started, shall we? So the first thing that we are going to need in order to do this is another NPM package called a request. And what that's going to allow us to do is make requests from the internet. If you're doing this on a front end JavaScript thing like in React or something like that, or in just vanilla JavaScript, you can do this in different ways. But because we're doing this technically from a server, which is what a Twitch bot like this essentially is, it's just a miniature server that's just running commands and listening for input. We need to do it in a slightly different way. So we're going to use a package on the Node package manager called request. So just like before, whenever we installed the TMI package to be able to listen to Twitch chat and be able to connect to Twitch chat, we're going to do a npm install, and this package is just called request. And then you're going to -- save like this. Press enter, wait for it to go. Sometimes this takes a minute because these larger packages like this can be rather gnarly. All right, so we have that. And now in order to use it, also just to confirm that you actually have it, in your node project, you can check your package.json, and you can see right here that we have the request package installed. So just like before, whenever we were importing the Twitch chat API, we're going to do another import. So we're going to go back to the top of our server file, our bot file. We're going to declare another constant. We're going to call it request. And you can call this whatever you want, but it's just kind of easier to have your variable names the same as the API name that you're trying to use. So we're going to do a require and then a string, which takes in a string, going to have request like this. So now that that is installed and is now imported into our project, what we can do is we can then create another command within the bot. So let me first, just to keep things clean, we're going to move our comments for the temperature conversion down here. We're also going to minimize, we're going to collapse this conditional to make things a little more visible for us. What we're going to do is we're going to, after this conditional right here, checking if the command is either Fahrenheit to Celsius or Celsius to Fahrenheit, we're going to do another conditional. We're going to say else if, because we want to check these one after another. So now we're going to check if the first word in the chat message is going to be called exclamation point define. That's what we want to do. We want the command in chat to be called define. In this case, what we're going to do is we are going to do a request. And that request has multiple parts. So in order to reach out to the internet and pull in information with the request API, the main thing you're going to want to do is you're going to just call the request command first. So the request API takes in two parameters. The first one is a JSON object that, for one, asks for the URL. In this case, this is going to be the only thing that we need in order to reach out to this specific API. And so what we're going to need to do is the URL is initially just this. And after the slash at the end, we want to request the word that is being requested with the command given by chat. And so just like before, where we would get the number for the Celsius to Fahrenheit or the Fahrenheit to Celsius command, we will get the word from the second element of the message array. So in this case, this is the only thing that we need in order to reach out to the internet and grab something from this API. A lot of other APIs will also ask for things like request headers and authorization tokens and different things like that, which will go within this particular JSON object, but this one doesn't require any such extra information, which is what makes it nice for teaching purposes. So the second argument that you're going to need is actually a callback function. A callback function is, as the name implies, a function that is run whenever the data is returned. So, and then function itself has three parameters. You have an error parameter, a response parameter, and a body parameter. So the error parameter is going to, this can simply not exist. If there's no error, the error parameter simply just will not exist in most cases anyway. And then the response gives us various bits of information, including the status code of the request. So you're probably already familiar with things like status codes. So if you've ever gone to a website and you get a message 404 error not found, content not found, something like that, 404 is a response. It's a status code that comes in through the response header. And so in this case, we are going to be specifically looking for a status code in the response header of 200, because 200 is the response code specifically for a successful request of information. Whenever you get further into doing different types of requests to and from the internet, you'll notice that there are different types of status codes that go along with them. And so the one that you're most familiar with is 404, when something is not found. And the one that we're looking for is 200, because what we're doing in software terms is called a GET request. We are attempting to get information from the internet. So if we have a API that allows us to say, like, write to a database, for example, what we would do is called a post request. We're attempting to post something to the internet. And the response code that you're looking for with a post request is typically 201. But we're not worried about post requests in these videos, or this video in particular. We're just worried about a GET request, since that's what we're doing. So the first thing that we want to check once the response comes back is we want to do a conditional. We want to say if there is no error. So if there's no error, that means that the error does not exist. And if you remember from the previous software concepts videos, particularly the logical operators video, the exclamation point in front of the error variable indicates that we are looking for the opposite of that value. So if there is no error, then this is true. So this would say error false. So if we're saying that there is no error, then that means that this is true. We're just getting the opposite result of what this is. So if no error is true, and if the response dot status code is equal to 200, then we know that we have successfully gotten the information from the API, and then we can do something with it. So in this case, we're just going to start off with a console.log where we want to just print out the body, which is just the data that goes along with the response, the actual data that we're looking for. So the way that we're going to get the data is typically this data is encoded as a string, but it's actually a JSON object. This is common because it keeps things nice and condensed for whenever you're storing something on a database. So the way that you make a string that is formed as a JSON object into a JSON object again is you use the built-in JavaScript function. It's called object called JSON, all caps JSON, dot parse, and then you put in the string that you want to make into a JSON object, again, in this case, the body. And if there is an error, we want to simply put out the error. So we want to say else. We want to console.log. We want to do the error, and we want to know what the status code was. So you can actually have more than one parameter in a console log, and it'll give you all of them. So now we can simply try this and see if it works. What we're going to do is we're just going to start the bot. We're going to put in define. We want to know what a burger is. So let's see. We're going to type in the exclamation point define burger. So we just got some information back. We'll stop the bot so it doesn't get slammed. Okay, so what this gives us is multiple things. It gave us a JSON. So first off, it gave us a array. And within that array, there is a single element, which is a JSON object. And the different attributes that we're given is the word that we requested, the phonetic of it, the various phonetics of that, and then the origin, and then also the various meanings of it. So let's do a little more with this because we want to see what the meanings and the phonetics are. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna create a new constant, and we're going to just call it parsed JSON. I don't know why I always tend to use that in my work whenever I do something like this, but I tend to use it a lot. Okay, so I want this to just be the parsed string of the JSON, giving it the object again. And now we want to console out the parsed JSON. We want to console out the first JSON at the first element. So that gives us just this. We want to know, we want to see the object. We want to see this. So let's get phonetics. Phonetics. And we also want the definitions. So meanings. That should be that. Let's see if this gives us what we want. At the bottom again, we'll do another define burger. Okay. And stop the bot. What this does for us is, okay, so we get even more, okay, we get even more objects within the objects. So what we're trying to do is we are trying to simply dig down deep enough to where we can grab the definitions of each part of speech. So the meanings, we're not really even worried about the phonetics. We just wanted to see what it would look like. So actually, we could do something with this later, to where if we wanted to, we could have the audio come up in someone's browsers. They clicked it, but that might overflow the Twitch character limit. So what we care about, we can get rid of the phonetics for now, is we care about the meanings and we care about definitions. So if this is the case, what we want to do, we want to get this, we want to make this at index 0. Looks like there's one thing right there. And we want the definitions. Definitions. Okay, so we want to see what that gives us. Good. Off the bot. All right, so now we have the definitions array right here. So there's a single definition right here that actually gives us the definition itself. So what it seems like we need to do here is pull in the definition itself. Sorry, we need to pull in the information regarding the word and then pull out from that all of the different meanings that can happen and then parse that into the different parts of speech and define each one of those and hopefully keep that concise enough fit into a Twitch message. This might take a while. If you see me change shirts throughout this video, this is probably going to take me multiple days because I only have 20 minutes left of this stream. All right, so let's actually start off with breaking down the response into its multiple parts and then trying to construct a definition based on the information that you're provided. But the first thing we need to do is we need to have a basic understanding of the structure of the data. So we want to grab element 0 of the first thing that's returned, which is just the parsed JSON at element 0. That's all we care about. Then we want to loop through the meanings array. So this here, we want to loop through the meanings array. And then for each meaning, we want to separate it into a part of speech, which then requires us to loop through each definition. So we're going to be doing multiple loops within this. So let's write out some basic steps that we're going to take in order to do this. This is essentially basic software design in a nutshell, what we're doing right now. So what we're going to do is I'm going to create some comments up here. So step one, and this is, like I said, essentially basic software design at its finest. So you essentially take a problem, and this is the engineering process as a whole. If you really want to oversimplify the engineering process, this is how it works. You take a problem and you try and figure out the large goal that you're trying to achieve. And then you figure out the steps that it's going to take to achieve that goal. So let's say it takes 3 steps to achieve that goal. And then for each of those 3 steps, you break that down into, let's say, 3 steps for each of them. And then you keep doing this down, and simplifying those steps until you have essentially a tree of steps that you need to take and then build up to the final solution. So the size of the steps that you're essentially looking for is something that you can do simply and easily enough within, depending on the scope of your project, either just something like a few minutes to maybe a few days. And then you just keep doing these steps that build up into the higher parts of the problem. By the time that you get up a tier on the list, then you're going to have all of the prerequisite work done in order to achieve those steps that you're now working on in the higher part of the tree. And then you keep doing this until you build up into the final solution. That's essentially the engineering process as a whole. And we apply that in software very often. So what we're looking for is, first, we are going to grab the meanings array, and loop through it. And then step 2 is for each part of speech within the meanings array, loop through the definitions. Definitions. One of the things you'll learn as you do software is you slowly lose the ability to spell. It's a fact. Just accept it now. And add them to string. And the string is going to be what our final result to chat is going to be. And then last thing that we need to do is send the completed string chat. This is the 3 steps that we're going to need to take in order to accomplish the goal that we have in front of us. So first things first, let's see. So we can simplify our problem here a little bit to reduce some typing. So whenever we have the parsed JSON, we're parsing this right here. This right here is an array, which is how we can just say parsed JSON at the element of 0. So if we want to simplify our lives a little bit, because this is already an array, we can just put the element of 0 right there. So that way, we don't even have to use this anymore whenever we're typing out our stuff. You want to try and understand how your code is working in such a way that you can kind of reduce the amount of typing that you have to do. It keeps your code cleaner and also makes things much more manageable for your brain. So step 1, we want to loop through the meanings array. And so we're going to do that with a simple for loop. What we're going to do is we're going to say for, and if you're not familiar with for loops, you can check out the playlist that I have on this channel, which should help you understand how loops work. If you're in the Twitch chat right now, ! learn JS should give you that playlist. What we're going to do is within our loop, we're going to create a iterator variable. We're just going to call it I. That's just rather standard. You can call that whatever you want, but I is pretty standard. So we're going to keep looping so long as the value of I is less than the length of the meanings array. So in this case, we're going to say parse JSON dot meanings dot length. And every time that the loop gets to the end of a block, we're going to increase the value of I by 1. And so that's what this is. So I plus plus. The plus plus indicates you're just saying I equals I plus 1. All it does is it adds 1 to the value of I. We just keep looping so long as we have parts of speech to loop through. So I also forgot something that we want to do right here. So first thing we want to do is we want to create a new variable. We're using this as a let because we want to be able to actually modify this variable. We don't want to be able to directly modify the parse JSON. You'll notice that I've been using const a lot, and const is short for constant. Constants are things that you do not want to modify the value of the variable because you need that to stay the same. Otherwise, your program just kind of freaks out. But whenever you have a variable that needs to change, then you use let. So in this case, we're going to say, let returned definition. And it's a good idea to have your variable names as descriptive as you can. It doesn't matter if they get long, especially if you're using an IDE with like autocomplete and stuff like that, because it just makes your life so much easier to know exactly what your variable is doing and why it's there. So we're just going to have this variable be an empty string. So to have an empty string, you just want to have a set of quotation marks. So what we're going to do is we're going to say, okay, first we want to add to the returned definition the part of speech that we're working with. In this case, we're working with a noun. So what we're going to do is we're going to say returned definition equals, because we're modifying it, the current value of returned definition. This may seem a little bizarre at first, but hold on with me. I'll try and explain. Plus the first JSON meanings at the value of I, because this is an array. We want to make sure that we're getting the current part of the array that we are in. That's currently the I value. So this will keep you within the current part of the array that we're working in. So at the current value of I, then we want the part of speech. The part of speech. Okay? And then just to keep things clear, we want to add in a semicolon. Actually, no, let's put in a dash. Okay? And then right there. So what we're doing is we are saying that we want the return definition values new value to be the current current value, which right now is just an empty string, plus the part of speech that we are currently working with, and a dash. So what this becomes for now is just noun space dash space. That's what this becomes for now. So now what we want to do is we want to create another loop within this loop to get the definitions. So what we're going to do is within this loop, we are going to create another loop. And so this is where things might get a little confusing, but I'll try and keep things as clear as possible. So we're going to create another loop, but instead of I right here, we're going to use J. Traditionally, if you're creating what's called a nested loop, which is what this is, I explained it more in the loops video in the JavaScript playlist. This is a nested loop. We have a loop within a loop. So you can't use the same iterating variable. So we can't use I because it's being used right here. So right after I in the alphabet is J. So what we're going to do, we're going to say for the iterator J, as long as J is less than the first JSON meanings at I, so long as the iterator is less than the current meanings array of definitions length, we keep going. So to try and simplify this, within the meanings array, within each meanings array, there is a definitions array. And each of the definitions array has a definition. So this is kind of how JSON objects and data in structuring your data sort of gets confusing, and it's honestly difficult to try and explain how that works in a practical sense. But I hope that the more that we do these projects, the easier and the more intuitive that it becomes. And you'll notice that software as a whole becomes easier and more understandable the more that you do it. So the best advice that I can give you for stuff like this is to simply code. Find small little projects that force you to learn something new and then stretch yourself within that and just let the compiler or the interpreter just throw an error and see what happens and try and learn from that. But I will try and explain these things as I go along in the best way that I know how. So, just like before, what we're going to do is we are going to update the return definition with now the definitions, the word that we are working with within the part of speech that we are working with. So in order to do that, what we're going to do is we're going to do the same thing as we did before. We're going to say return definition. We want the new return definition to be the current value of the return definition plus the current definition that we have. So in this case, actually, I'm going to add in something else as well. Plus, we want to have the number of the definition that we're working with. So, and if you're going to do this, what we're going to do is we're going to say j plus 1. And the reason that we're saying j plus 1 is because, remember, we're starting at 0. Computers counting 0. So if you say just j, you're going to get definition 0, which isn't it's not very readable. It's not very intuitive. So we're going to say j plus 1. So we're going to say definition, in this case, 1, and then add in a colon, just for clarity's sake. Then we want to get the definition itself. In order to do that, we need to grab parse JSON at the current meanings of the current part of speech index, meanings index. Sorry, I messed up. What we want to do is we want to grab parse JSON at the meanings array, current set of meanings. And then we want the definitions array of the current definition, so which is j, and then we want the definition, which is this down here in the command log, the terminal. Then we want to add in a separator. So for the next verb, let's just add in a space just to keep things simple, right? Then after this array, for every part of speech, we want to add in a separate separator. So if we're going to do that, we're just going to say returned definition equals return definition plus, let's just separate it by a double dash. So that way we'll get the next part of speech at that point. And then also, if we want to make sure that we don't get this dash dash at the end of everything, even if we only have one part of speech, we can do that by adding in a conditional. If I, so the current meanings array, the current index of the meanings array, is less than the parsed JSON meanings array length minus 1, then we do this. Now you may be wondering why I'm saying minus 1. And the reason for that is if you look back up here, back on line 46, you're going to notice that we are saying if I, the iterator, is less than the length. We're not saying if it's less than or equal to, we're saying if it's less. So you're never going to actually get the value of the length. You're only going to get to length minus 1. So the last value that I can be is the length minus 1. Just a little trick you can pick up the more that you do this. So then, once this is all said and done, what we can do is we can come down here. Well, let's comment this out. Well, you can comment out basically anything, and it just won't work, won't run. Let's comment this out for a minute, and then let's just say chatbot, and then say now it's time to actually put in what we're doing. We're going to send it out to the channel. We want to have what's actually returned to the channel, the return definition. That's it. That should work. So let's turn on the bot. Also, let's console log the return definition, just so you can see it in the video. Return definition. So if this works, we should get the definition of a burger in the chat. So start the bot, definition of a burger, and there we go. What we got was exactly what we were hoping for. What it returned is that this is a noun. Hold on, I should probably turn off my webcam. So what this did is exactly what we were hoping for. It returned that this is a noun with one definition, and that definition being a dish consisting of a flat round cake of minced beef. Sometimes another say you get the point. So, yeah, do y'all have an idea for a word that would be potentially multiple definitions? Let's see, we could do something like, okay, let's try a word like inevitable. Yeah, I know. I'm Iron Man. Let's see, inevitable. Okay, so we got ourselves an error with this one. Why? Cannot read property of status code of undefined. So it seems like we may have hit the API again too quickly, which makes sense considering that this is a free API. You don't want to hit these things too hard and overwhelm them. So let's give it a second, and then we will try it again. Okay, so it worked this time, and it gave us, excellent, it gave us more than one part of speech, as well as the definitions for each. Back in my day, moments weren't even invented yet. All right, for those of you watching the YouTube video, I changed shirts because I had to do this over multiple days. So the problem that we are now facing is that we need to be able to only run this command every minute, 2 minutes, so that we don't overburden the dictionary API, which, because it's just a free and open API, it doesn't allow for very quick of a hit rate. So we try hitting this more than one time within, I think it's it doesn't say in the documentation because there basically isn't any documentation. It seems like if we hit this more than once a minute, we'll get some kind of error. So the way that we are going to fix this is we are going to set up essentially a cooldown system so that once this thing is triggered, it will then set a cooldown for, what do we think, Chad? 1 minute? 2 minutes? I'm thinking maybe 90 seconds so that we don't end up getting any avoidable errors from overburdening the API. And then the next thing we need to do after that is handle cases where we try and request a word that doesn't exist. So, for example, if we misspell a word or if we just put in something nonsensical, it should handle that case and give us some kind of feedback showing no results found instead of just giving random data that may be unintentionally cryptic. So let's start off with the cooldown system first. So essentially what the cooldown system is going to look like is we are going to track multiple dates. Essentially, we're going to be subtracting the current time with the time from the last execution of the define command. So if you go to this here link right here, which I will leave in the description of the YouTube video, what we're going to do is we're going to use the date object in JavaScript. And the way that this works is the date object basically just tracks the number of milliseconds it has been since the epoch time. And epoch time was January 1st, 1970. So we get the number of milliseconds since that date. And so what we'll do is to make things as simple as possible for us is we're going to set a date. I say date, but the date also tracks the exact time at which it was called. So what we're going to do is we are going to track when the last time that the define command was executed. And then whenever it's called again, we'll check against that date to see if 1 minute has passed or 90 seconds. Let's just make it easy. Let's just say 2 minutes. So we'll say, has 2 minutes passed since that last execution? And if it hasn't, we will output some kind of, this command is on cooldown kind of message. And if it has been more than 2 minutes, we'll just run the command again and then reset the date time in order to be 2 minutes from the last execution. And so that's how basically cooldowns work, at least in the case that we're going to be doing it. So first thing that we're going to need to do is we're going to need to define a variable that we can track it pretty much anytime. So this is going to be a global variable, and we're going to just call it define command last called. And we're going to set this up to initially just be the date and time of right now. The way you do that, you just create a new date object, just like that. So whenever the bot starts, it's going to create a date and time object that's set to just right now. And essentially, as soon as 1 millisecond has passed, then we can run the define command. So you can essentially just run it as soon as it happens. So to make this as simple as possible, what we're going to do is we are first going to check if the last called date is later than, no, I'm sorry. We're going to check if the current date is later than the last called date. If it is, then we can run the command. So if the current date minus the defined command last called is greater than 0, this means that that it has been more than 2 minutes since the last time that the command has been called. We are off of the cooldown. Otherwise, we are still on the cooldown. What we're going to do is, if we are still on cooldown, we are going to have the bot say that, so we're going to call this, we're going to send it to the channel, and then we're going to have it say, the define command is on cooldown. Please try again in few minutes. Okay, so then if this works, what we'll do is we will reset the defined last command's time to the current time that it's been called plus 2 minutes. So the way that we will do that is we will first reassign the defined last command as a new date again, which sets it to the current time that it was called. And then, in order to set the minutes, what we will do is we will, so looking at the date documentation, what we'll do is we will call the get minutes. Sorry, we will call the set minutes first. We will say set minutes, and then for the argument within the set minutes command, we will then call the current minutes and then add 2. What that'll basically do is just call this, make this the current time, and then we will increase that time by 2 minutes. So basically, at this point, we need to set the time at which the next define command can be called. And so the way that we do that is we take the current time that the last time that it was called, and we set it to the current time. Once you do that, you just set it to a new date again, and then you want to set the minutes of this 2 minutes ahead of time. So you call this again, say we want to set the minutes, and the argument for the minutes that we want to set is going to be the current value of the minutes, so the get minutes, which is just a number, and then plus 2, which should have it 2 minutes ahead of the time that it was called. So then, once we do all that, what we're going to do, we're going to take everything that we've done already and shift it up into this success case bracket right here. That's all we're doing. So now we should have a working cooldown system for the define command. Operative word being should. So, first thing we're going to do, we are going to get into our source folder. And we're going to say node bot, start the bot, should be running now. And chat, you would be so kind as to do an exclamation point, define, and then space, and then a word that you want to define. This should work if you would be so kind. So define multiverse. So multiverse being a noun, a hypothetical space or realm consisting of a number of universes, of which our own universe is only one. And so Jettison just tried defining cheese, which I should have done a console log for that, and it says that the define command is on cooldown. So let's wait 2 minutes. The current time is 5:35, and we should be able to run the define command at 5:37. I reckon it was a hop, skip, and a jump in time. Find cheese, and we do. We do have the actual working cooldown. So Jerry just defined the cheese, of course, which of course, I love the second definition of cheese here. The quality of being too obviously sentimental, which is kind of my life. I like showing care, okay? So if you would be so kind as to try and use it again while the cooldown is still going, I want to see if it still does the cooldown like kickback. Nice. And it does, which I really should have had a console log here, but just trust me on that, it works. So, very nice. That is how you do a cooldown with dates in JavaScript. Tracking dates is super handy in a whole lot of different situations. So that is a skill that if you can pick up sooner rather than later, you will help yourself a lot in software in general. So the next thing that we need to do is try and figure out what the bot's going to do whenever we input a word that is either misspelled or does not exist. So the bot is still running. So if anyone in chat would be so kind as to do a exclamation point define and then just some kind of gobbledygook, or just take a word and purposely misspell it. Let's see what happens. It's probably going to kill the program, but if it doesn't, okay, so what we get is a null 404. So what we're doing is whenever we get a word that does not exist, we get a message that is null. That could actually be deceiving because what we're printing out to the console log is a returned definition, which is nothing. Actually, no, we're not doing that just yet. What we're doing is we are returning an error. So we get the error, which is null, actually. And then we get a response code of 404. So there is, in fact, no error. And if there is no error, but the response status code, which is what we're looking for, if there is no if the status code is not 200, which the status code of 200 means that we have successfully retrieved the information we're looking for, then that means we have a different response code. So what we can do is we can say and go down to this else block. Down here, this is going to be simpler than what I anticipated. So up here is the success case, meaning that if the word exists, means we do not get an error and we have a status code of 200, then we have the success case. Otherwise, in this else statement, then we have the failure case. So what we can do is we can say if the status code of this request is 404, then we put out a response to the chat that this word does not exist. So if the response dot status code is equal to 404, which I'm sure many of you have seen a response code of 404, status code of 404, meaning that something is not found, then what we do, we have the chat say to the current channel that we're in, which is, of course, ours. Then we have it say let's actually get the word that we pulled in. So we're looking for the word array at index 1. So let's just say word array at the second index, which is index 1, because we start counting as 0. So the word that was requested was not found. Was not found. Please check your spelling, and try again. So that should be the extent of what we need to do. So what we're going to do is I'm going to turn off the bot. And then also let me add in a console log for when the bot is on cooldown. So come down here. Yep, right here. So when the bot is on cooldown, we also want to have a console log so we can see it on the stream. Console.log, and we'll just copy in this string and put that in so we can see it on the video as well. And then we will start the bot again. All right, chat. So if you would be so kind as to try searching for a. Actually, sorry, no. Let me add in another console log so that we can see this properly. Console log, and we will copy in this. Well, okay. Yeah, we should be able to see everything. All right, chat. You would be so kind as to attempt to search for a word using the define command that is misspelled or does not exist. We will see what happens. Okay, so Wolf tried searching for top dough, which was not found. So top dough was not found. Please check your spelling and try again. I should have taken out that comma. Why did I have the comma there? That is not proper English. So I'll just take that out now. All right, chat. Actually, since we executed that, try the define command again. I want to see if it goes on cooldown, even with a misspelled word. Let's see if it does it again, because hopefully it goes on cooldown. I think I did it right. So let's check it. As long as you do it within the first 2 minutes. All right, so it is in fact on cooldown. So that's good. Now we'll just wait another minute or two, and then we will try and search for a correctly spelled word and see if the happy case still works. And thank you for that follow, Elriton. Yo, Elriton, thank you for gifting 10 subs. That is madness. I really appreciate that. Thank you so much. Seriously, that's super generous. Well, you haven't even said anything in chat yet. You're already dropping subs. So I really do appreciate that. Thank you so much. There we go. Which it is rather appropriate that GB would try and define love on today, since it is in fact Valentine's Day. So, which also works for the bot. Now, if any of you would try and define another word again to see if we are on cooldown, that would be very helpful, because we have this thing on a 2-minute cooldown so that we don't overwhelm the API. There we go. So the define command is on cooldown, so you hold it at 6:13 my time, and it should be available again at 6:15 in a couple of seconds. So as far as I'm concerned, we have a working define command, which reaches out to a API, pulls in the JSON data for a word that we have requested, parses it out into the parts of speech for that particular word, and then spits out a chat message with the appropriate definition of the word requested, and also has error handling for using the command too often, as well as if a word does not exist. So I would say that we've got this thing pretty well in the bag. So in the next video, what we're going to do is we are going to start messing with the Twitch API directly. So not just the chat version of things. We're going to start messing with the Twitch data that we have specifically for this channel. So like for the game or the category that we're in, we're going to do specific things with the bot based on the game or the category that we're in. And so in order to do that, we need to work on having data from the Twitch API directly. So we're going to work on that in the next video.